Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. Annoyance rippled through Mary's shoulders, and with a long, weary sigh, she fixed her gaze on the window pane. However, the scene beyond the train carriage glass offered no comfort. Below, on the grimy platform shimmering under puddles of rain, the familiar picture of station haste unfolded, the constant companion of a long-distance train's departure. In these pre-departure moments, life seemed to pick up a frantic pace. Movements became feverish, faces startled, joyful, and the carriage attendants especially nervous and unwelcoming. Understandable, though. Was it really so difficult for respectable citizen passengers to arrive at the station well in advance? To approach their carriage calmly beforehand, to quietly take their assigned seat? No, they absolutely had to rush to board at the last minute, only to then assault the narrow passage, which wasn't even tall enough for everyone, in a cramped crowd, waving tickets and shouting something. Look at that lady in the clearly restrictive skirt, pondering how to climb the step without damaging her outfit or reputation. Honestly, it's comical. What a thing to wear for a journey. And someone else, for whom the carriage assault is yet to come, rushes down the platform in the last, critically late minutes, losing bags, string bags, children, and their last strength along the way. Like that gentleman over there, for example, dragging two-wheeled suitcases, each topped with another enormous bag. It's simply astonishing how some people manage to fit so much into their luggage. Some ants or dung beetles, it seems, carry less than their own weight. And if it were just things, but some people stock up on provisions as if it's their last chance to eat in their lives. Look at that stout lady, taking tiny steps, her arms spread wide, gripping a dozen bread baguettes between them. Evidently, the woman is terrified of not reaching her destination and dying of hunger along the way, although she looks as if she could survive for at least a year without eating at all, especially not bread, which, incidentally, would only do her good. Oh, and who is this walking with rare composure? Look at that fellow, glasses on his nose, and in his hands such a substantial collection of crosswords that it's visible even from here. Well, the intelligentsia. He'll pretend to be a know-it-all the whole way, while constantly peeking at the back of the magazine every other word to sneak a look at the answer. And if you, sir, are so clever, why do you check your ticket every 5 steps and then lift your head, searching for the carriage number sign? Do your 2 or perhaps even 3 diplomas not help you simply remember the right number and find it calmly? Ah, that's it. The composure has vanished. He glanced at his watch, realized he was late, and also ran down the platform like a goose. Someone else, conversely, stood frozen, fighting the urge to flee before the train finally started moving. These, without a doubt, were the senders off. Look, for example, there's a bustling, thin fellow who just now, straining himself, helped a rather unattractive lady, about 3 times his size, into the carriage. For goodbye, the madam gave him a very expressive, menacing look, and even, for added conviction, shoved her fist under his nose. The man's face shows clear relief and joy, which he clumsily disguises as sadness. He's probably gotten rid of his dear wife, at least for a while, and is now barely restraining himself from breaking into a dance right there on the platform out of happiness. And here's another type of sender-off, the romantic one, so to speak, a girl, thin, pale, with lipstick smeared across her lips and clear streaks of smudged mascara on her cheeks. What's happening here? A real drama. Interesting. Who is she seeing off? Ah, that guy over there. There he is, sticking out of the carriage door, and the attendant, far from romance, is apparently trying to shove him back in. Well, well, looks like lovers. How sweet, if you ignore the fact that the guy is clearly pleased. Look how cheerfully he's waving his arms, almost falling off the step. The girl, on the contrary, is all sadness. Obviously, she senses that nothing good will come of this separation for her personally. Yes, my dear girl, yes. Your boy is going to the capital now, and that's the last you'll see of him. Molly suddenly started and listened to her own thoughts in amazement. What was wrong with her? Where did all this bile come from, this biting, malicious irony directed at innocent, completely unknown people? Why was she standing by the carriage window practically spitting sparks of irritation? She had never been like this. What kind of foolish and, most importantly, malicious thoughts were crowding her head? After all, maybe it wasn't like that at all. Perhaps the man with the huge luggage was the father of a large family, and when calculated per person, it would indeed be one bag or one suitcase per person, which was perfectly normal. And now, instead of a greedy merchant, a man appears who is simply bravely carrying everyone's belongings. Who does he have there? Maybe his 5 children are waiting on the benches, or rather, on the shelves in the compartment. And the aunt with the loaves is the mother of the family, and the rolls in her hands are just a couple of snacks. And the intelligent man with the crossword collection is actually a brilliant person, an erudite. And not only does he not peek at the answers, but on the contrary, he himself creates these puzzles. And with the senders off, everything could be completely different. The guy and the girl really love each other, and she's crying not from suspicion and bad premonitions, but from separation. And he's just a cheerful person who expresses his sadness by smiling. He went on business, and when he returns, they will get married, and everything will be very good for them. And the lady in the narrow skirt, well done. She waved her hand, smiled shyly, and pulling her fabric higher, climbed into the carriage, simultaneously causing a wave of joyful approval from both the senders off and the men waiting to board. Indeed, travelling by train is no reason to dress in shapeless, ugly clothes. A woman should always remain a woman if her soul demands makeup, a skirt, and heels. A long-distance carriage is no obstacle for that at all. And even this thin fellow, maybe he's just happy that he managed to stuff his immense wife into the carriage because she could easily not have fit through the door. Although no, with this man, her initial suspicions are most likely correct. He's tapping his foot too impatiently. He clearly has more interesting plans, and he doesn't want to waste a minute of his free time. Feeling herself being carried away again, and the smile that had appeared on her face again, turning into a sarcastic smirk, Mary moved away from the window. No, it really wasn't normal that she was so irritated. She had to get a grip on herself somehow and not turn into a wicked shrew. She went into the compartment and sat down in her seat. The reason for this bilious outburst was, in principle, understandable. Mary couldn't stand trains and everything connected with them. The very thought that instead of 4 hours of dozing in an airplane seat, she would have to spend 3 days in a train carriage, 2 nights and 2 full days, constantly getting up, sitting down, even lying down, if, of course, she dared to do so. It simply exhausted her. She had never in her life spent so much time on a train. Such a long journey was frankly frightening. And generally, she couldn't shake off the funny and foolish but persistent thought that having boarded the carriage as a relatively young woman, she would get off it as a grey-haired and trembling old woman. The long train journey was forced, the only way to get home in the near future. Mary Smith, a financial auditor for a large company, was on a business trip to one of the holding's most remote enterprises. The deadlines for the audit initiated by the firm's management were uncertain, and Mary hadn't booked a return ticket, assuming it could always be done. Imagine her astonishment when, instead of the usual ticket form, she was handed some kind of slip. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "It's a train ticket," the girl from the factory secretariat announced cheerfully. "You know what?" Molly exclaimed, indignant. "You must be joking. Take this nonsense back. I'm not travelling by train." "Well, fine then," the cheeky girl nodded. "In that case, Mary, you're staying with us for a long time. Well, at least for another month. Understand?" Seeing Molly boiling over, the girl decided to explain herself after all. "This isn't the capital, you know. There are only 2 flights a week, and tickets for them are bought up a month, or even 2, in advance. Especially now, in the middle of vacation season." "So what? Why should that concern me? It's your job to get me a ticket. So be kind enough to get me one. And I don't care how you do it. I need to fly out the day after tomorrow, or at the latest in 2 days. I need to be there on Wednesday." "Well, that's good. I've done my job. I've provided you with a ticket. You'll leave by train tomorrow and be there on Wednesday." The girl, apparently very self-confident, looked at Molly quite defiantly. It became clear that arguing further was simply pointless. Mary snatched the ticket from the girl's fingers and picked up her phone. "Hello, is this the airline ticket office?" she said into the receiver. "I need a ticket for tomorrow's flight." "You know, so do I," came a voice from the receiver. "Outrageous," Mary articulated clearly to the giggling interlocutor and hung up. She simply couldn't stand train journeys. All this road romance, the groves and fields flashing past the window, the wires and poles racing alongside the carriage, none of it brought her any joy. She didn't shed tears of tenderness at the beauty and vastness of the Russian expanses, and she didn't feel like reciting Yesenin's poems. On the contrary, the flashing of tree trunks quickly made her slightly nauseous. The beloved clatter of the wheels, which many passengers found soothing, didn't calm her down, but rather irritated her. Food, which again many passengers actively used to brighten up the long journey, stuck in Mary's throat, causing sensations similar to those caused by the flickering outside the window. She could only sleep normally if 3 conditions were met: complete darkness, complete silence, and complete stillness. It was easy to guess that with such demands, there was no question of Molly sleeping on the train. How could anyone sleep at all when everything around you is shaking, creaking, banging, flashing with light, and talking in different voices? Oh, and here's the most important thing, the notorious carriage conversation, which for some reason is considered mandatory. As if the fact that people suddenly found themselves in a confined space makes them almost relatives and like-minded individuals on issues of raising children, growing flowers, the terrible quality of products in stores, and real estate prices, which are, well, simply outrageous and keep soaring. And if someone doesn't want to participate in these discussions, they immediately become unpleasant for everyone and a very suspicious person in general. Such outcasts are looked at expressively, and eventually the person with no interests is forced to shamefully leave the compartment so as not to interfere with normal people discussing vital topics. In short, the entire carriage atmosphere was deeply unpleasant to Mary. "All right, never mind. I'll just sit as long as I can. I'll think about my own things, maybe read, take a nap. In short, I'll survive somehow." She finally resigned herself to the inevitable, listening to the wheels clattering over the tracks as the train started moving. The women in the compartment seemed normal, at least for now they were quiet and hadn't taken cutlets out of their bags. And then her resignation was once again put in danger. What danger? Simply ruthlessly destroyed. "Oh, my dear, I see you have the magazine Amateur Gardener. Are you into tomatoes, are you? Oh, wonderful. Tell me, darling, have you tried planting the Moscow Ultra Early Tomato?" came the words of the lower neighbour in the compartment, addressed to another passenger. The elderly, lively woman looked with pleasure at the younger, more cheerful lady. At least, the upper berth didn't bother her at all. "Oh, wait!" The owner of the upper berth deftly slid down and stared at the old woman in admiration. "No, I don't even know that one. I always plant the Ural one. It's also early." "Oh, come on, that's the last century, the native of, at least, the first half of that very last century, and even closer to its beginning," declared authoritatively. "There's a wonderful variety, early Moscow. You absolutely must try it. It's absolutely amazing. I plant it in May, directly into the open ground, and most importantly, it doesn't need to be pinched at all." "Really? You don't say?" her interlocutor exclaimed, astonished, and even pressed her hands together in silent rapture. "Yes, yes, and its tops are so wonderful, fragrant, so bright. It's a shame you can't give them to piglets, but mine happily gobble up carrot tops too, although some smart Alex also say, you can't." The elderly woman continued to unfold the picture of her hobbies before her admiring interlocutor. "Oh yes, you shouldn't listen to just anyone, they don't understand much," the other woman actively agreed. "Nothing will happen. I, by the way, love fresh tops myself, in a salad, in soup, and you can chew them as they are. Oh, and do you know how they help with joints?" "Really?" The specialist in growing unpinched tomatoes became interested. "Uh-huh," the tops enthusiast exclaimed. "So, here's what you do. You take a couple of the fluffiest carrot tails, chop them, brew them with boiling water, and then—" Mary slid out of her seat and, feeling the pitying glances on her back, left the compartment. The day was drawing to a close. The sun, hanging right on the side Mary was looking at from the carriage window, had dipped towards the horizon and was flooding everything around with a pinkish golden light, casting reflections on the glass. It was very beautiful, and even a nature as thick-skinned as Mary Smith felt this beauty, as her mother used to say about her jokingly. When romanticism and enthusiasm were being handed out, our Molly was pushing to the front of the line for intelligence and perseverance, her mother would chuckle, hinting at her daughter's not-so-girlish character. Molly did indeed very rarely admire landscapes, still lifes, and other picturesque combinations. But this time, perhaps because there was nothing else to do, and for the first time in many days, or maybe even years, she was just standing idle with no particular thoughts. She sincerely admired the summer sunset, piercing the entire space between the horizon and the moving carriage with scarlet golden rays. "Beautiful," Mary breathed out in admiration, and it turned out she had said it aloud, because next to her came a similar sigh, as if in response, and a male voice. "Indeed, Mary, it's very beautiful. I just never would have thought you paid attention to such things." Molly started in surprise and didn't even immediately realize she had been addressed by her full name, and when she suddenly recognized the voice, she just shook her head. If there was anything she lacked to completely and irrevocably hate carriage life, it was the presence of this man here. Honestly, she would rather have stayed in her compartment, listened to her neighbours' gossip, and perhaps become imbued with the ideas of folk medicine and gardening values. In any case, her chances of that were higher than of having a normal conversation with the man who had suddenly ruined her enjoyment of the sunset. She raised her head and squinted. "Well, I'll be, Charles," she exclaimed, portraying joy rather unskillfully. "What a pleasant surprise, is that you?" "Yep, it's me," he confirmed, also cheerfully, but unlike her, he seemed sincere. "Imagine, what an unexpected meeting. And I'm standing here, you see, looking, and I can't believe my eyes. I even rubbed them. Good heavens, I thought, it's Mary Smith herself in person. Not Molly, but Mary, she hissed through her teeth. I've told you 1,000 times. Don't butcher my name with some stupid rustic accent. Save your swaggering simplicity for gullible girls. Oh, don't be offended. I didn't come up with it. That's what they called you at our factory. You see, Mary the craftswoman. You really wove a lot of lace there in 2 weeks. So intricate. Now the whole management is sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to untangle it. He spoke with a serious expression, but his eyes were openly laughing. You're lying, Molly suddenly declared, as if I don't know that all the stupid and, incidentally, not at all funny jokes circulating around the factory are your doing. In short, all this nastiness comes from you. And as for business, you know, you shouldn't have tangled things up, that is, let things get so out of hand. Then the whole management wouldn't have to be sitting here now. By the way, maybe someone else will end up sitting there too. Well, literally, for real. For negligence in reporting, Mary heated up. And personally, if I were you, my dear Charles, I wouldn't be so calm and self-confident. After all, the chief engineer is not the last person at the factory. So, in short, I don't want to talk to you, especially about such topics, and generally it's unpleasant for me to see you. The thought that this pleasure will last 2 days makes me shudder. So on the contrary, this is a damn unpleasant unpleasantness. That's all. I wish you success. She turned her back on the man and rushed towards her compartment, and suddenly stopped as if hitting an invisible wall, and couldn't believe her ears. There was a quiet laugh behind her. She turned around in surprise. He was indeed laughing. And suddenly Mary caught herself thinking that she hadn't seen anything more attractive in a long time, unless, of course, you counted today's sunset. Still, despite his disgusting manner, strange sense of humour, and monstrous, inexplicably based self-confidence, he, Charles Jones, was good-looking. Just good-looking, that's all there was to it. And denying it was as foolish as claiming that the sun wasn't setting at that moment but rising. Now, when he wasn't wearing greasy overalls, his cheeks were clean-shaven, and there wasn't a routine smudge of machine oil on his forehead or nose, it was especially noticeable. His rather fine, regular features didn't make his face effeminate. On the contrary, it was 100% masculinity, just beautiful. But the main decoration of his face was his eyes, light grey, transparent, framed by dark eyelashes. In combination with his dark hair, high forehead, white teeth, and excellent build, it was all very striking. And the most amazing thing was that the owner of all this external wealth was completely natural, and seemed to say to everyone around him with his whole appearance, "Well, yes, I'm good-looking, I know, but it's not my fault I was born this way. Although, honestly, I'm not complaining. If I've offended anyone by this, I apologize, but generally it's nonsense. So, what were we going to talk about?" But despite all his attractiveness, Mary couldn't stand him. She had gotten to know Jones quite well during the 2 weeks she spent at the factory. She acknowledged his merits, at least some of them, and, it must be said, was even indebted to him for her rescue in the literal sense of the word. And yet she couldn't help herself. She found him deeply unsympathetic. But sometimes it happens that people are just unpleasant to each other for no objective reason, without explanation, on the level of feelings and emotions. That was exactly how it was for her, for Mary, towards the factory's chief engineer, Jones. And it seemed the antipathy was mutual. At least, he didn't miss a single opportunity to needle her, often quite painfully. In short, her relationship with Jones was complicated and not particularly pleasant. And this was all the more frightening because he was, without a doubt, interesting, handsome, brave, decisive, intelligent. And there was something else, something she couldn't articulate, but only vaguely felt. And this something bothered her, interfered with her life. Because of this, she was even more angry with Jones. All this just made him even more repulsive. It's like some kind of nastiness in an attractive, beautiful package, she thought angrily, plopping down in her seat and startling her neighbours, who even interrupted their discussion of composting or mulching methods. For Mary, however, it was all the same. "What's wrong, dear?" the older woman asked, looking at Mary with concern. "You have spots all over your face. Wait, I'll pour you some tea from the thermos with chamomile and honey. It's very calming. Maybe you need something else?" "Yes, I do," Mary nodded. "Can you help me throw someone out of the carriage? He's hanging around here, you see, some unfinished Alain Delon." "Oh, are you talking about Charlie?" The old woman suddenly reacted completely unexpectedly. And indeed, he does look like Fanfan la Tulipe, only older. Yes, a bit stockier, a bit more solid. And how did I not realize it myself? "About Charlie?" Mary repeated, amazed. "Do you know him?" "Well, how do I know him?" the woman smiled. "We met at the station while he was helping me out. You see, oh, we haven't even introduced ourselves yet. And we're travelling together for 2 days. What are your names, dears?" "Mary," she grumbled, trying to put on a pleasant expression. It's easy to be silent when you don't know anyone. You're not obliged to socialize, but now you must. Introductions have been made, and a compartment acquaintance is almost family, at least for the duration of the journey. "Molly, wonderful. My name is Eleanor Johnson, and this is Martha." The old woman nodded towards her tomato-minded compatriot. "Well, so who are we talking about? About Charles." Her face broke into a smile. "He helped me so much with my suitcase, damn it. He dragged it and me along to the carriage, shoved us in, so thanks to him I'm travelling, otherwise I'd still be sitting on my trunk in the station square." "Big deal. A saviour. Just a normal manly act," Mary grumbled. "He's still a bore." "Charlie, a bore?" Eleanor Johnson exclaimed, surprised. "What are you saying, Molly? He's a wonderful person." "Oh, yeah. How long have you known him?" "A couple of hours, and I've had that pleasure for 2 weeks now, so I know better," Mary declared. "Oh, Molly, is time really needed for that? You can tell such people right away at first glance with your heart. He's a wonderful person," Eleanor said. "All right, Eleanor Johnson, I won't argue with you." Mary waved her hand and lay down on her berth. "Well, I'll be. What a cherub, a saviour of old women, Siberian Fanfan. And he's not Fanfan at all, he's a braggart. Oh, forget him, as if she had nothing else to worry about. She herself, by the way, had God knows what going on in her life." But deciding not to think about Jones was much easier than actually not doing so. Her thoughts kept returning to this man, who was completely unlike anyone she had met in her 35 years of life, and who suddenly, by a strange whim of fate, found himself very close, literally behind the thin partition of the compartment. Mary found herself at the factory, located in a small Siberian town 3,000 kilometers from the capital, by order of the head of their huge holding, which united more than one such enterprise under its wing. Arthur was Molly's patron in the literal and figurative sense of the word. He was an old friend of the Smith family, was friends with Molly's father, Robert, and, as family legends had it, honestly and openly tried to win the girl away from his friend. Well, the girl preferred Robert Smith, became his wife, gave him a daughter, Mary, and Arthur, in his own words, remained forever inconsolable, in love, hovering before the newlyweds as a perpetual reproach. However, Eleanor always laughed cheerfully remembering this story. "Well, yes, Artie, I remember how long and tempestuously you grieved for 2 days, she would nod, and then went to the cinema with your Sally. So don't blab, or people will think we had a love triangle. Despite such details, the trio remained friends throughout their lives, and having buried his suddenly departed friend, Arthur seemed to take responsibility for Eleanor and 10-year-old Molly, and was very happy when Mary, finishing school and having outgrown her girlish dreams of a film career, modelling or sports fame, seriously considered finance as a future profession. "That's right, Molly," the by then solid, authoritative and very wealthy businessman would say. "You go study and then come work for me. We have such things developing now. You know, I need my own people, especially in these financial matters where the devil himself would break his leg." Molly graduated from university and of course came to work for the very holding where Arthur was one of the founders, directors, shareholders, in short, the most important person. "Well, everyone will say you hired me just because I'm a Smith, your friend's daughter," she doubted. "And why can't I hire you because of that?" Arthur asked, surprised. "Especially since you're like a daughter to me too. Come on, Molly, don't fill your head with nonsense. Start working. And if it turns out I was wrong about you, well, I'll fire you, regardless of your surname. That's how we'll fix your reputation." But the old businessman was not mistaken. Mary turned out to be an excellent financier, and each year of work only added to her experience, foresight, and intuition. After a few years, she became the company's chief economist auditor, spending a considerable part of her time travelling to numerous enterprises, firms, factories, mills, and combines, assessing the correctness of reporting and production efficiency. "Mary, my dear girl." Arthur always addressed her with this strange phrase when a difficult conversation was ahead. "We, or rather you, have a little trip planned, you see. We need to shake up our factory in N. Things have gone quite badly there." "In N?" Mary asked, surprised. "Hasn't it been shut down yet? I thought they were planning to. The profit's there. A cat could weep. The costs are enormous." "Before making a final decision, we need to go, study the situation thoroughly, estimate how much needs to be invested, and if it's worth it. So you go." Arthur suddenly brightened up. "You know, my good acquaintance Charles Jones has been working there as chief engineer for about 10 years. He's quite a guy. And you take a closer look at him there." "What? In what sense?" Molly flared up. "In that very sense," the man nodded with a smile. "Arthur, you're completely— May I remind you? I'm married." "Oh, come on, Molly, what marriage? Forgive me, an old fool, for meddling in your affairs. I just can't bear to see you tormenting yourself and wasting your life on a man who never deserved you." "All right, that's enough. I'm sorry. You're a grown girl. You'll figure out your own affairs. And as for the factory, I repeat, I will only agree to liquidate it if everything is completely hopeless there." "Well, Molly, you know, it's my hometown. There's nowhere else for people to work there. I wouldn't want to deprive them of their last resort, and the people there are wonderful." So, inwardly scolding her boss for his unexpected sentimentality, Mary found herself in the far distance at the old, dilapidated factory, which, in her opinion, was doing so completely in vain. On the very first day of her business trip, she was convinced that all her suspicions were correct. Everything was bad here, very bad, even worse. The equipment was old, the machines rattled like a pile of scrap metal, and the financial reporting was simply appalling with errors, miscalculations, and outright blunders. Who Arthur was so admiring of, speaking of wonderful people, she, frankly, didn't understand. She met the chief engineer, that very quite a guy, under rather scandalous circumstances, such that she herself was, frankly, a little ashamed to remember the meeting. For a couple of days, She sat in the accounting department, digging through reports, frowning angrily, maintaining a significant and tragic silence, frightening the hapless chief accountant with her appearance, and finally said, "All right. Well, this is all clear to me. I need to talk to the management of all this." She gestured towards an imaginary figure, meaning the outrage factory. "But, Mary, you know, the director and his deputy will be here tomorrow. The only management member currently at work is Jones. He's our chief engineer." Suddenly the lady perked up, as if feeling a surge of energy. "So it would be even better for you to talk to Charles. You have a lot of questions about the equipment." "Yes, very many," Mary smirked. "Where is this chief engineer's office of yours?" "His office is nearby, the next one down the corridor. But he's not there. He's hardly ever in his office," the chief accountant replied. "And generally, does anyone from your management actually come to work? You know, for a change?" Molly asked, annoyed. "Oh, what are you saying, you misunderstood? He is at work," the woman rattled. "He just doesn't sit in his office. He's mostly in the workshops. You can go straight there. Someone will take you. Only, Mary, you know, you should change your shoes. It's not very clean there. It's production after all." "It's not just not very clean here," Molly mimicked the chief accountant, getting up decisively. "There's outright dirt everywhere here, literally and figuratively." "Now where is your hapless chief engineer?" Molly shouted irritably, trying to be heard over the noise of the machines and keep her safety helmet from slipping onto her nose. She should have listened to that funny, naive woman from accounting and changed her shoes. But now it was too late, and an oily stain of some nastiness was spreading on her wonderful suede shoe. In her annoyance, she was ready to immediately grab the throat of this damned chief engineer, because of whom she was trudging through the dirty workshop. "Why hapless?" a voice asked from somewhere around her knees. She jumped back in fright. A dirty man in overalls, with hands so smeared they looked alien and just attached to his sleeves, was crawling out from under a stationary line. "Why hapless?" he continued in a slightly hoarse voice. "Quite happy with life, actually, and if I manage to catch the hockey game broadcast tonight, I'll be completely happy." Molly stared at the talking worker in amazement. No, this wasn't a factory. It was some kind of circus, a travelling show. "Listen, you," she frowned. "I'm certainly impressed by your knowledge of your boss's affairs, but just tell me where he is. Where is this so-called chief engineer of yours?" "Again, you're wrong," the strange worker grumbled. "He's not so-called. He's quite real." "That's it. I've had enough," Mary snapped. "This is just a real madhouse. Either you tell me immediately where your Jones is, or I'll—" "No need for anything. I'm here," the dirty man in overalls suddenly said. "Excuse my appearance, but allow me to introduce myself. Jones, Charles." "Ah, and why?" She struggled to find words, but quickly recovered and almost shouted, "Why are you here and looking like this? Don't you have anything better to do? What is even going on here? Are you a manager or what? How can anyone take you seriously? That's why everything here is in such a state, because you, the factory's chief engineer, instead of controlling business processes, organizing, coordinating work, are sitting under some piece of iron and turning nuts. You see, my dear woman, if I don't immediately tighten this nut on the piece of iron right now, I'm afraid there won't be anything to organize and coordinate, and nothing to manage either. The business process will collapse," the man replied sadly. But she had a distinct feeling that he was laughing inside. His eyes gave him away, large, light grey, shining on his grimy face like two precious stones of very pure and high quality. "And what is this dear woman?" she snapped. "I'm not dear to you, and I'm not just any woman." "Yes," Jones said, surprised. "Well, about the first part I can agree. It's a bit early to call you dear. But what about the second? And who are you, if not a woman? And again, that obvious, sly, good-natured mockery, plus the faces around, smiling for no reason instead of working. Probably those wonderful people, according to Arthur. Mary closed her eyes and tried to recall something from the numerous training sessions she had attended on effective interaction with personnel. But nothing suitable came to mind, so she simply and scandalously screamed, her voice rising at the end of words. "That's it. Enough. I'm tired. Remember, my name is Mary Smith, and I've come for a comprehensive audit of your enterprise, and I have the widest possible powers, up to and including completely shutting down your fly-by-night operation. In 20 minutes, Mr. Jones, I expect you in the director's office with documentation for all equipment and clear explanations for the ineffective use of the fixed assets and assets entrusted to you." "I can't make it in 20 minutes. Let's make it 40, Jones said calmly. "Mary, please don't consider it disrespect for your widest powers, but I absolutely need to get this fixed asset entrusted to me up and running, and I also need to wash my assets." To the laughter of the now quite numerous crowd, he extended his dirty hands towards her, covered in ingrained grime. Mary suddenly realized that if she wanted to save face, or rather, what was left of it, she'd better keep quiet. She snorted, tilted her nose up, turned sharply on the spot, and almost fell flat on the floor because of a broken heel. Oh dear, who runs around a factory in shoes like that? Isn't it unprofitable?" She heard a quiet, hoarse voice, and finally hated its owner completely. "Boor, bumpkin, lout," she muttered, limping on her uneven heels towards the factory office. Probably became a boss purely by chance, just because there was no one else to appoint in this hole. All he can do is tinker with pieces of iron, and yet a wit. Well, never mind. I'll arrange a satire and humour contest for you. Exactly 40 minutes later, a short, broad-shouldered man entered the director's office, nodded gravely, and sat down at the desk. Molly noticed his solid movements, excellent suit, and neatly styled hair out of the corner of her eye. Well, thank God, at least someone is sane, at least dressed normally, not acting up, Molly thought, quickly finishing writing a sentence, lifted her head, and stared in amazement at Jones himself. "You!" She raised her eyebrows, trying to pretend she wasn't impressed by his appearance. "Well, that's completely different. It turns out you can look quite decent." "I can," he nodded with a sigh. "Though it rarely happens. Mostly I have to run around the workshop with a wrench, repairing fixed assets." "Exactly. Why are you running around? That's the job of a repair fitter, an adjuster, or whatever he's called according to your staffing table. He should be dealing with the equipment." "I completely agree with you, Mary, only we do have a staffing table, a beautiful large one. You read it and your heart rejoices. But we don't have repair fitters. That's the snag." He nodded seriously. "Firstly, I'm not Molly, I'm Mary. Mary Smith," she articulated precisely. "And secondly, why don't you have fitters?" "Well, probably for the same reason we don't have turners, millers, general labourers, and many other things. We pay little, so people don't come to us. Serious salaries are paid at enterprises that make a profit. That's a simple truth, and you, as a manager, a leader, should know it and explain it to your subordinates," Mary said proudly. "I know, Mary, and I completely agree with you. I tell Vic, my last adjuster, the same thing every day first thing in the morning. Vic, you see, wait, and as soon as profit floods in, you'll immediately get a serious salary." Jones looked at her without the slightest hint of a smile. She took a deep breath. A terrible person. Although he does look... Yes, he looks. Wait, what was she thinking about? "Stop calling me Molly. I'm Mary." "All right, let's talk specifically about your affairs. I looked at the reports on equipment maintenance and operating costs. My hair stood on end. What profit can we talk about when, with terrible expenses, the utilization rate of your machines and lines is below 40%? Are you completely out of your mind? Can you explain this to me as chief engineer? I can, he nodded. But for fairness, let's first rename me the chief antiquarian keeper of old things, because half of our equipment has long existed only in these papers here. He pushed several folders towards her. And what's left, thank God, works at the percentages you mentioned, dear Mary, with God's and our help. And yes, you are not Molly, I remember. Listen, Jones, let's talk seriously, she said after a pause. You understand that with the current state of affairs, it's more profitable for the holdings management to close the factory than to invest huge sums in it. Well, yes, of course, it's more profitable, and there's no need to think about 1,000 people who will be out of work. And do you know that we have 9 dynasties of hereditary factory masters? And the fact that we still make the best quality products on our junk, there's little of it, but it's the best. He waved his hand. All right, wait. Let's say you have excellent masters in production, but the specialists, they're no good at all. I spent 2 days checking the accounting entries and reports. You're Eleanor Miller. Her knowledge is like a technical school graduate, and she's the chief accountant. And Eleanor is a technical school graduate, and even if she's missing something, she's an honest person and works for 3. Jones frowned. You know, Mary, I've been working here for 10 years, and in my time, not a single girl from the capital in suede shoes has ever come here to work. Maybe then we would have a great chief accountant. Yes, it's easy for you to say. You were born here, you live here, probably your whole life. Do you think it's easy to just pick up and move to this backwater? And by the way, I've been meaning to ask you, where did you get your Moscow diploma? She suddenly asked. By chance, Mary, just like the position of chief engineer. A pure misunderstanding, he smiled. Stop calling me Molly, Mary corrected him habitually, more to catch her breath. All right, Charles, you can go. Thank you. You're welcome, not Molly, he said, and left. Well, how can you have a normal conversation with a person like that? Oh, come on, Mary, how is he local? Jones, he's from your area, a native Muscovite. Did he study there? Yes, his parents still live there. He visits them on vacation. The girl from the HR department was terribly flattered by the attention of the auditor from the capital, and especially by the fact that the lady was clearly inquiring about Jones, confidentially, so to speak. You know, I don't know all the details, and I don't like gossip, of course, but Charles is, well, simply a romantic hero. He had some kind of personal tragedy there, in Moscow, something terrible. That's why he left and came here. And he lives here, well, just like some kind of monk, can you imagine, with his looks. Arthur. Mary mumbled into the phone, embarrassed. So why exactly is Jones hanging around here? Interested? Did Charles hook you? Arthur suddenly sounded pleased. In what way? Are you serious? Molly exclaimed, indignant. It's just that he's, how should I put it, unusual maybe. He has... Molly, his life is in complete ruins. His wife was pregnant and died. It happened a long time ago, many years ago. That's why he's been wandering the world alone ever since. But luckily, he's suffering in the vicinity of our factory. Everything there relies solely on Charles. Well, I think you've already realized that yourself. Imagine, it turns out this man has a lot of rather grim things behind him, and yet he sometimes acts like a stand-up comedian, she thought then. And a few days later, perhaps the most terrifying episode of her life occurred. That day, she got bogged down with documents and left the factory office when thick August twilight had already settled around. The hotel where Mary was staying during her business trip was located nearby, a couple of stops away, but it was late, and waiting for a bus seemed a dubious undertaking. "I'll walk," Mary decided, remembering a shady alley shown to her by someone from the factory, which stretched through a semi-abandoned park, cutting off a good portion of the way and leading directly to the hotel. After a whole day spent in a dusty office among piles of papers, Molly inhaled the refreshed evening air with pleasure and briskly padded along the tiled path. And suddenly, two figures emerged silently from the darkness, as if woven from the air. One quickly stepped onto the path in front of Molly, and the second behind her back, cutting off her retreat. "All right," the one in front drawled in a low male voice. However, it was already clear that these were tall, stocky men. In the twilight, due to the terror that gripped her entire body, they seemed simply enormous. Well, well, what a fairy, and quite a looker herself, and such a promising handbag. Right, Mitch? He continued. The one standing behind grumbled something, clearly sharing the admiration for the woman and her handbag. "All right, lady, let's do this the nice way. If we come to an agreement, nothing will happen to you." "Well, what do I mean nothing? Nothing too bad, that is. A gentleman's word." He laughed. "Listen, do you need money?" Mary finally managed to overcome the spasm in her throat. "I only have a card, but I'll tell you the code. Here, please take it." She fumbled with trembling hands to open her bag. "Of course you'll tell us, absolutely, but that's for later, after," the man grinned. She couldn't fully see his face because of the dark hood pulled low over it, but she saw dark stubble, among which teeth gleamed in a terrible grin. A real beast flashed through her mind. In fact, compared to this creature, who was called a human only by mistake, even the hungriest, meanest wolf in a dark forest would seem like a harmless puppy. And of course, she didn't believe for a second his assurances that he supposedly wouldn't do anything too bad to her. "I wonder how quickly they'll find me, if they find me at all. And if they do, will there be anything left to send to Mom?" "Well, I took a shortcut, you unlucky idiot," Molly suddenly thought, somehow detachedly, almost calmly. "Please listen, don't touch me," she said in a trembling, breaking voice. "Oh, come on, madam, I'm a well-mannered man. Did you notice I don't even use you informally? I continue to respectfully address you formally," he chuckled. "I told you I'm a gentleman." For some reason, after this phrase, Molly became especially frightened. If they were just simple thugs, crazed by drink or some other nastiness, there would be hope of persuading them, bribing them, stalling for time, or finally just trying to break free and run away. But before her stood two strong, steady-on-their-feet villains, from whom emanated waves of malice and cruelty. "Do you hear that, gentlemen?" She suddenly heard a quiet, firm voice. "Get out of the way. Let the person pass." Paralyzed by terror, she couldn't even turn around to look at the unexpected, fairy tale-like help. Though it wasn't necessary. The new character in this grim scene appeared from somewhere to the side, and decisively, ignoring the stirred-up men, pushed Molly behind his back, moving her towards the edge of the alley. "Oh, what a lucky day today, right, Mitch?" The one in the hood grinned. "Check out the jacket on the guy. You've wanted one like that for a long time, haven't you? Come on, guy, take off your jacket and get out of here quickly. I have a date with the madam here." "Doesn't look like it," the unexpected protector chuckled, whose voice, to Molly, who was slowly coming out of her stupor, seemed familiar. "You don't have flowers, and the lady isn't throwing herself at your neck." Molly raised her head and fixed her gaze on the speaker's back. He was strong, but far from being a bandit. He was shorter, smaller, and clearly weaker. "So, a rival, huh?" The man in the hood bared his teeth again like a beast. And I don't tolerate rivals. I simply eliminate them, literally. He slowly drew his hand from his pocket, and a blade gleamed brightly in his fist in the light. "All right, the evening is becoming less romantic," the man standing in front of Molly muttered. She squeezed her eyes shut in terror, and when she opened them, she blinked in amazement. Still clutching the knife in his hand, the attacker, met with a move, fell to the ground with surprise on his face and lay still. The man stepped on his hand with the knife, added a quick and precise blow to the head, and straightened up. It was Jones. He quickly smiled at the stunned Mary and turned to the second bandit. "You wanted to take my jacket," Charles grumbled. The guy mumbled something unintelligible and rushed to attack, and a second later choked on a gurgle, running into a fist. Jones's second fist landed on his head, and suddenly, perhaps because of the helpless expression that appeared on his face, he seemed like a boy to Mary, almost a child. "Oh, you'll kill him," Molly blurted out. "Why beat him up?" She asked this almost with indignation, as if this very guy hadn't threatened her with a terrible fate a few minutes ago. Jones looked at Mary in surprise and shook his head, and she, freed from danger, hating herself for it, instead of thanking him for saving her, suddenly said in a nasty voice, "By the way, brute force isn't always the best argument, and anyway, we need the police." Jones nodded seriously and took out his phone from his pocket. "Station. Who? Captain Miller? Oh, Pete, hello. Yeah, it's me." Jones smiled broadly. "Pete, good to hear from you. When did you get back? They said you went to Baikal for fishing. Yes, I was there. Oh, Pete, you're a pig, you could have invited me. All right, so how about the Ormel there? You don't say, what were you catching it on? On a jig. Listen, have you tried—" Charles stood there chatting on the phone as if he were sitting in an armchair at home and not standing in the middle of a dark alley with bandits lying 2 steps away, and with her, Molly, trembling and sobbing beside him, apparently having a delayed hysterical fit. "Oh, Pete, all right, you'll tell me everything in detail later. Why am I calling, Comrade Captain? I need you to send a squad. We have 2 citizens resting here, one with a very sharp knife and a beautiful woman they scared badly. And also," he looked at Mary ironically and chuckled, "I need to be detained and questioned about exceeding the limits of self-defense. Why the jokes, Pete, I mean, Comrade Captain? This citizen insists that I could have acted more gently, although, He suddenly leaned down, looking closely at the face of the lying man from whom the hood had slipped. "It seems gentleness wouldn't have worked here. I suspect this is Vic, your long-time charge. Why, Pete, is this one of yours wandering around free? Out again? Oh, wonderful. How happy I am for him. He's been released, and apparently went straight to the library, and he took a knife to carefully cut stuck pages. You're something, Comrade Captain Pete. He's scaring people, and you're fishing on Baikal. All right, send them over. We'll wait on our old alley, right near the former stand with former leading workers of the former production." "Can you ever be serious?" Mary asked him when he put his phone back in his pocket. "Mary, I'm very serious, really, and now that I've seen exactly who jumped you here, I'm even slightly scared, honestly. If I had known it was Vic the repeat offender, I never would have gotten involved. Well, you see, since it happened, please forgive me for beating him up. Don't file a police report against me, all right?" Jones looked down with a guilty, repentant expression. You're a clown, you!" she exclaimed, indignant. "You're ready to make a circus out of everything. I'm tired of repeating myself. I'm not Molly, I'm Mary." "Mary, Mary, 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 Molly, Molly, dear." Someone gently but noticeably shook her shoulder. "Molly, dear, my dear, wake up, get up. It's been morning for a long time. My, how you slept. You can tell right away this person loves travelling by train." Mary slowly opened her eyes. Eleanor Johnson and Martha were sitting opposite her, smiling. as if contemplating a sleepy, dishevelled face with hair sticking up was the most pleasant thing imaginable. "Morning!" Mary exclaimed, amazed. "Did I sleep through the whole night?" "And how?" the old woman laughed. "It was a joy to watch and listen." Molly looked at her reflection in a small mirror in amazement. Wow, she had just lain down to think about life. She didn't remember when her memories had turned into a sound sleep of unprecedented duration. "Molly, dear, why did we decide to wake you up?" "Please don't be angry, dear, but we're having a guest now," Eleanor Johnson smiled. "So you should wash up and comb your hair, and we'll have breakfast." "A guest!" Mary exclaimed, and suddenly noticed that both her compartment neighbours were dressed in nice tracksuits, had clearly styled their hair as much as travel conditions allowed, and had even, imagine, touched up their lipstick. "Yes, Charlie, I mean Charles," Eleanor said. "Well, not exactly a guest, actually. He's coming to fix our lock, because the door in our compartment is sticking. Martha and I barely got out this morning. Our sleep isn't as heroic as yours, Molly dear." Eleanor laughed quietly. "Fix the door, Charles," Mary said, bewildered, and didn't even immediately realize that for the first time his name didn't cause her irritation, but joy. She listened to herself in amazement and asked, "And who gave him permission to fix anything here anyway?" "Oh, come on, Molly dear. Charles has golden hands. He's already fixed half the breakdowns in the carriage. He fixed the boiler, several outlets. The attendant can't praise him enough. She even gave him a bottle of tincture, and he told us he'd finish his business and come to us with that bottle. So you, Molly dear, should also dress up, because he's such a—" And Eleanor sighed lyrically and bashfully. Jones came, and not alone, but with his neighbour, the intelligent-looking man who had been boarding with the Crossword magazine. "Well, Charles," the man said, holding the compartment door open, "how skillfully you do everything. It's simply amazing, truly a master. And I, frankly, at first thought you were some kind of scientist. You won't believe it," he turned to the ladies. "I considered myself an experienced crossword solver, but compared to Charles, I'm just nothing. He simply knows everything. For example, do any of you know which admiral sank the Turkish fleet in the Battle of Chesma? And which classic Russian writer discovered 20 new species of butterflies? And what is the unit of measurement for odour intensity? No, and neither do I, or I don't remember. But he knows. All the answers to all questions." The man laughed. "Just some kind of magician." "Oh, come on, Edward Davis," Charles chuckled, checking the repaired lock. "Well, I know some things. Some things you can just think about and guess, even if you don't know." "For example?" the others asked eagerly. "Well, for example, this question. Which living creature has its brain located farthest from its heart?" All right, interesting. And who is it?" Eleanor Johnson and Martha exclaimed, clapping their hands. "Well, think about it. Estimate the distance. Try to guess. That'll keep you busy. It'll last you halfway." Charles smiled. "But how, Charles? We'll never guess." "No, you must tell us," the women worried. "We'll just torment ourselves. Please tell us." "A giraffe," Molly suddenly said quietly. "A giraffe's brain is farthest from its heart." Charles looked at her and nodded silently, almost imperceptibly. And the minutes, the hours flew by so quickly that she didn't even notice how the journey, which had seemed unbearable and endless, had come to an end. And now she waited with dread for the train's last stop, the last look at him, the last touch of that strong but gentle hand with traces of machine oil forever ingrained in the skin. After saying goodbye to everyone, Charles suddenly turned, walked quickly to her, and slipped a piece of paper into her hands. "Mary, Molly, perhaps we'll never see each other again, but just promise me one thing. If you need help, if you need me, just call me. I'll do anything for you." He looked at her intently, honestly, and desperately, and she saw recognition in those eyes, his recognition of something for which words were unnecessary. Charles picked up his bag and quickly strode towards the carriage exit. "Oh, Molly dear, forgive me, of course," she heard Eleanor Johnson's voice. "We certainly won't see each other again. And I'll tell you this, my dear. You, Molly dear, are a silly girl. That is, forgive me again, just a fool. He loves you, and you love him. Even a half-blind old woman like me can see that. Ah, Molly, well, the giraffe is alive." When Arthur spoke of Molly's worthless family life before her business trip, he himself didn't realize how close he was to the truth. That life, that family, and nothing else had long ceased to exist for her. She and David had lived together for almost 8 years and never understood why they had spent those years together. And it had never been so hard to return to her apartment as it was after those weeks at the factory and 2 amazing days on the train. "Mary, I've filed for divorce," she heard from David as soon as she crossed the threshold. "Molly, I know you'll be unhappy. It's all somehow unexpected, undignified, perhaps. I don't know. But I feel like you're the only one who's doing so well. Thank you. I've never been so grateful to you in all these years. Thank you." Mary grabbed her astonished and frightened husband, or rather ex-husband, by the hand and shook it. She rushed out of the apartment, despite all of David's attempts to explain something about court, property division, apartment documents, and some other nonsense that was completely unnecessary to her now. She wanted only one thing, to dial the number written on the piece of paper and hear his voice say her name, slightly distorting it in his simple way. Molly. And he answered so quickly that the first ring hadn't even stopped, as if he had been waiting for her call continuously. They sat on a comfortable bench under an old maple tree, which was already visibly highlighted with autumn colours. "You know, Charlie," she said, feeling his warmth, tenderness and strength, sensing it with every cell of her body and melting with happiness, so simple and easy. "It's amazing, because back then, well, when we ended up on the same train, at first I thought I just hated you, didn't I? And now, just a few days later, I don't understand how I could have lived without you for so many years. Unthinkable." "Well, what's unclear and amazing about that, Molly? You know the saying, from love to hate is one step. And who said the path from hate to love is longer?